welcome back to Facts or Frauds and the Dangers of the Sovereign Citizen Movement, Part 2.
The Southern Poverty Law Center began tracking anti-government extremist groups in the mid-90s after a series of events sparked a rise in militia groups throughout the country. Those events were the 1992 siege at Ruby Ridge, Idaho, and the 1993 assault on the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas. The movement hit a high point in 1995 when a bomb planted by Timothy McVeigh exploded in front of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. After the bombing, leaders in the anti-government movement made a conscious effort to distance themselves from white supremacy. Some rejected that type of violence, while others feared the racism would make their message less palatable. In reaction to the 9/11 terror attacks and the U.S. response to them, nativist hate under a thin veil of national security rhetoric has become central to the Patriot movement's ideology. After the election of the first African-American president in 2008, a new wave of anti-government extremism was born, with groups like the Oath Keepers, the 3% Movement, and the Lightfoot Militia. During President Barack Obama's second term in 2012, the number of anti-government extremist groups rose to an all-time high of 1,360, fueled in part by changing demographics, a struggling economy, and the existence of an African-American president. The movement was again in the national spotlight in 2014, when the Oath Keepers, 3%ers, and others supported Nevada cattle rancher Cliven Bundy during his family's standoff with the Bureau of Land Management over grazing rights. Members of the Bundy family and their supporters took part in the armed occupation of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge in 2016. There, a confrontation with local law enforcement resulted in the death of one of the occupiers. That same year, 3 members of the militia group the Crusaders were arrested in Garden City, Kansas, after the FBI obtained details of a bombing plot aimed at Somali and Muslim communities. The attack was planned to devastate a housing complex with hundreds of residents. Had the FBI not thwarted it, the death toll may have rivaled that of the Oklahoma City bombing. Violent plots, like the one in Garden City, may become more frequent as anti-government extremists continue to use the internet to facilitate.
We're going to visit Brandon's gravesite. I come up at least once a week. I try to, but every time I go past it, I'll just kind of hit the horn twice. It's just a little thing I do. I let him know I'm thinking about him, but I do come visit with him and spend some time out there, and it's peaceful, it's quiet, and it's a beautiful little cemetery. It's a hard story to tell. It's an important message, as I said, and the only way that I can do this is the support I get from the officers that attend the training. They keep in touch with me, they contact me, they say that this training saved my life, and that's what it's about. How many of you had an encounter with a sovereign? A few, okay. How many have not heard of sovereigns before? Never heard anything about them? Since 2011, of August 2011, I retired from West Memphis Police Department as their chief, and I've gone full-time into educating law enforcement around the country on the dangers of sovereign extremists. Hate law enforcement. We are their enemy, and you have to understand that. A sovereign, basically, is someone that is against our government, someone that does not believe in paying taxes. They don't think law enforcement has any authority over them. They don't believe in our court system. And they're basically, they would be close to anarchists. They don't want any leaders. They don't want anyone over them but God. So they're totally anti-government. And some of them, not all, are just a serious threat to law enforcement.
Please hurry. Oh my God! Oh shit! 2 cops are dead. The other one's in the ditch. They're both dead now. They killed both cops. They shot one, he fell in the ditch. The other one ran behind the car, and they shot him in the hand. All right, where's the suspect now? They just left in a white caravan. They went right up the exit. That guy had an automatic weapon.
It was May the 20th, 2010. I was a police chief in West Memphis. We had an interstate interdiction unit working Interstate 40 for drugs and criminal activity. That day about 11:30, Officer Bill Evans, that was on the interstate unit, stopped a white Dodge van driven by Jerry Kane and a passenger, his son, 16-year-old son, Joe Kane. Within a short time later, Brandon, my son, arrives on the scene as a sergeant. He looks at the paperwork. He has no idea what he's looking at. The video shows that on the dash cam video. He gets the paperwork. He's looking at it. That is a distraction used by sovereigns to distract law enforcement from their traffic stop. And effectively what they're doing is sovereigns are taking over the traffic stop away from the police officer. So Brandon's standing there now looking at it. Bill has Jerry Kane off to the side. The kid, 16-year-old kid in the car, gives a signal to his dad. He pushes Bill Evans. He loses his balance. The door opens on the car, on the van, and Brandon turns his head to see what happened to his partner. And when the door opened and Brandon turns his head, the exact same sequence of frame on the video, the kid gets out with an AK-47 and shoots and kills both officers. Brandon took 14 rounds. Bill took 11 rounds through his vest. I was on the scene shortly. My wife had just had open heart surgery. She's out of the hospital just for a few days. We were coming to Missouri to where we have a home. And we got on the interstate and a call comes out over my radio, officers down. I was within a mile of where it happened. We pull up, tell my wife to stay in the car. And I get out and I see an officer lying in the ditch down below where the police cars are. It was Officer Evans. So I look back up the hill and I see one of my sergeants standing there beside the two police cars. I go up and the sergeant stops me and says, "Chief, please don't go around there." I pushed him aside. I went around the corner of the car and I see Brandon lying there on his back. I'm looking down at him. The back of his head had been shot off. He was covered in blood. And he was lying in all these shell casings. I remember seeing all these shell casings there that he was in. I said, what? And I couldn't figure out what was going on. He had his left hand over on his heart and his right hand was extended out like this and his .40 caliber Glock was clutched in his right hand. And I was standing over him trying to sort my thoughts together about what was happening. It was just like so surreal. Like a nightmare.
A white unmarked unit that had shots fired, possibly a white van, was going to be suspect.
That day, that instant that I was standing over Brandon, I lost the passion I had to be in law enforcement. I've been to every state but Hawaii and Alaska, and I've given it hundreds of times. But you need to be as prepared as you can be. We can't bring Brandon and Bill back. They're gone forever. But we can do something for you, and particularly for your families, to keep you alive so they don't suffer like we're suffering every second of every single day. It never goes away. Your life changes forever. I show this right here on the last one of the last slides. Then I show the funeral. I said, this is to show you how that when you go to work, you might not come home. I hope that they see this really and has a visual impact on them that, we need to be careful. Here's two experienced officers killed by one 16-year-old kid. And when they see this, and I think it registers to them when they see it that, this is real stuff.